Commander Vex'Tora of the Galactic Alliance fleet watched with barely contained disgust as the new batch of recruits filed into the training hall. Another cycle. Another collection of soft-bodied species thinking they had what it took to join the elite ranks of cosmic defense. As a Draxian, Vex'Tora stood tall and proud, his scaled skin reflecting the harsh overhead lights, forearms crossed in judgment across his armored chest. "Well, look what the gravitational pull dragged in," he muttered to Lieutenant Krav, his second-in-command. "Is this really the best the Alliance could find? I've seen more intimidating life forms growing in my ship's waste recycler." Krav, a hulking Mordvian with exposed muscle tissue and gleaming metal implants, rumbled a laugh. "The Alliance recruitment standards drop lower every cycle. Pretty soon we'll be accepting single-celled organisms." Vex'Tora's gaze lingered on a particularly small figure at the back of the group. Just a human female, barely reaching the chest height of the other recruits. Her frame appeared fragile compared to the bulky, armored species around her. Humans were among the newest additions to the Galactic Alliance. Having been discovered only 30 rotations ago, most considered them a curiosity at best, a liability at worst. "What's that one doing here?" Vex'Tora pointed with one of his lower arms. "Did someone bring their pet to training?" "That's recruit Penelope Barnes." Krav checked his data tablet. "Says here she graduated top of her class at Earth's Defense Academy." Earth's Defense Academy. Vex'Tora scoffed. "What do they defend against there? Insufficient caffeination?" The recruits stood at attention as Vex'Tora stepped forward, his massive form casting shadows across their faces. He began his standard intimidation speech, the one guaranteed to make at least 3 recruits drop out before the first day ended. "Welcome to hell, recruits. I am Commander Vex'Tora, and for the next 12 cycles I own you. Your previous accomplishments mean nothing here. Your species' reputation means nothing here. Half of you will fail. A quarter of you will quit, and at least one of you will probably die." He paused for dramatic effect. "Any questions?" To his surprise, the tiny human raised her hand. "Recruit Barnes," he growled, reading her name tag. "You have something to say already?" "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice unexpectedly clear and steady. "I was wondering when we'll be assigned our Draknir partners." The recruitment brochure specified training would begin immediately. A hush fell over the room. Vex'Tora's 4 eyes blinked in succession. The audacity of this microscopic creature. Draknirs were the most feared predators in the known galaxy, massive wolf-like beasts with scale-plated skin and multiple rows of teeth that could tear through reinforced steel. They were the Alliance's secret weapon, paired only with the most elite warriors after years of service. Even Vex'Tora had needed 3 years to earn his Draknir companion. The recruitment brochure. Vex'Tora's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Did you hear that, Lieutenant Krav? Recruit Barnes is concerned about the promises in our brochure." Krav chuckled menacingly. "Perhaps we should accommodate her. The Draknir holding pens could use a good cleaning." Vex'Tora's mouth stretched into what his species considered a smile, though it resembled a predator baring its teeth. "Excellent suggestion. Recruit Barnes, report to the Beast Quarter after orientation. Lieutenant Krav will provide directions." "Thank you, sir," Barnes replied with a nod, apparently missing the punishment aspect entirely. Orientation proceeded, with Vex'Tora taking particular pleasure in describing the gruesome ways previous recruits had failed. Throughout his speech, he noticed Barnes taking actual notes on a small device. Not cowering, not sweating with fear like the other human recruits huddled together, just calmly taking notes like she was at a cooking demonstration. "She's dead by the end of the week," Krav whispered as they dismissed the recruits to their quarters. "I give her 3 days," Vex'Tora replied. Lieutenant Krav led Penelope through the winding corridors of Outpost Sigma 9, the massive space station serving as the Galactic Alliance's main training facility. He'd been suspiciously quiet during their walk, probably expecting her to beg for a different assignment. "The Beast Quarter is our most restricted area," he finally said, punching in a complex code at a massive reinforced door. "The Draknirs aren't pets. They're weapons, sentient, cunning weapons with a taste for flesh, and a particular fondness for soft-bodied species. He glanced pointedly at her. "I've studied their biology extensively," Penelope replied, adjusting the cleaning equipment they'd given her. "Fascinating evolutionary path. Convergent features with Earth's extinct theropods, but with mammalian social structures." Krav stared at her. "Did you miss the part about them eating people like you?" "Not at all. But their predatory behavior is contextual and situational. They're actually quite selective." The door slid open with a hiss, revealing a cavernous chamber beyond. The smell hit her first, a musky, primal scent that triggered something deep in her hindbrain. Cage after cage lined the walls, each containing a massive creature. The smallest Draknir must have weighed at least 800 pounds, with the largest easily topping a ton. "Your assignment is to clean the waste from the first 5 pens," Krav said, handing her a long tool with a collection basket at the end. "Don't make eye contact. Don't approach the containment fields. If an alarm sounds, run for the exit immediately." He paused. "Though running probably won't help." Penelope nodded, taking the cleaning tool. "Understood, Lieutenant. The waste disposal unit is there." He pointed to a large receptacle in the corner. "I'll return in 3 hours. Try to still have all your limbs attached." With that cheerful goodbye, Krav departed, the heavy door sealing behind him. Penelope stood alone in the cavernous chamber, surrounded by the galaxy's most feared predators. She could feel dozens of eyes tracking her movements as she approached the first pen. "Well," she muttered to herself, "at least he didn't assign me to cafeteria duty." The first Draknir watched her from the back of its pen, a massive blue-gray creature with glowing amber eyes. Its scale-plated hide rippled as powerful muscles shifted beneath. Four-legged with a heavy, armored tail, it resembled an unholy cross between a wolf and a crocodile, with some dinosaur thrown in for extra nightmare fuel. Penelope began her work, using the long tool to collect waste through the containment field. The Draknir watched her intently, but made no aggressive moves. "I know this isn't the most dignified first meeting," she said to it conversationally, "but I figure we might as well get acquainted." The creature tilted its massive head, multiple pupils contracting. "I'm Penelope Barnes. Recently of Earth, now of nowhere in particular." She continued working methodically. "That pompous commander thinks this assignment is punishment, but between you and me, I specifically requested beast quarter duty." The Draknir moved forward slightly, its massive claws clicking against the metal floor. Most would interpret the movement as threatening, but Penelope noticed the subtle changes in its posture. Curiosity, not aggression. "You see," she continued, "humans have something your commander doesn't understand, something that served us well on our evolutionary path." She finished cleaning the first pen and moved to the second, where an even larger Draknir, this one a mottled green, growled lowly. "We weren't always at the top of our food chain. We learned to understand predators by necessity." The second Draknir lunged at the containment field, which sizzled as the creature rebounded. Penelope didn't flinch. "Impressive display," she commented casually, continuing her work, "but your pupil dilation gives you away. More defensive than offensive. You're not used to being approached calmly." By the third pen, Penelope noted something interesting. The Draknirs were communicating, subtle vocalizations just at the edge of her hearing range. The third beast, a scarred veteran with one eye clouded white, approached the containment field cautiously, sniffing. "That's right," she encouraged. "I'm different, not a threat, not prey, just different." The fourth pen contained 2 smaller Draknirs, clearly younger than the others. They bounced with energy, chittering to each other as she worked. "You two are chatty," she observed with a small smile. "Siblings, I'm guessing?" "Still in adolescent development from the look of your scale patterns." But it was the 5th pen that changed everything. As she approached, the lights in the chamber seemed to dim. The other Draknirs fell silent. Within the pen lurked the largest specimen she'd seen, its hide a deep, midnight black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Multiple scars crisscrossed its massive form, testament to countless battles. The creature didn't growl or bare its teeth like the others. It simply watched, with an intelligence that sent shivers down Penelope's spine. "Hello there," she said softly. "You're different too, aren't you?" The black Draknir rose to its full height, easily 10 feet at the shoulder. It approached the containment field with deliberate slowness, each step measured and controlled. Against all protocol and common sense, Penelope set down her cleaning tool and stepped close to the shimmering barrier. The massive predator's head was now directly across from hers, separated only by the energy field. "You're the alpha," she whispered. "Not just of this pack, but all of them." The creature's massive jaws, which could engulf her entire torso, opened slightly. But instead of a roar or growl, it emitted a low, rumbling sound that vibrated through her chest. Then, to her amazement, the Draknir lowered its massive head in what could only be described as a bow. "Well," she said, a slow smile spreading across her face, "I think we understand each other." Vex'Tora was midway through his meal when Lieutenant Krav burst into the officers' mess hall, his usual composed demeanor completely shattered. "Commander, you need to come immediately." The human Shi's Krav seemed unable to complete a sentence, his respiratory orifices flaring in distress. "Dead," Vex'Tora suggested, not bothering to hide his lack of concern as he continued eating. "Maimed? Having a psychological breakdown? Really, Krav? Be specific." "She's with Atlas." Vex'Tora's food utensil clattered to the table. Atlas was the designation for the Alpha Draknir, a beast so ferocious that even veteran handlers approached with caution. The creature had been captured in the wild after slaughtering an entire colonial outpost. 3 elite warriors had died subduing it. "What do you mean with Atlas?" Vex'Tora demanded, rising from his seat. "Sir, I don't know how to explain it. You need to see for yourself." Minutes later, Vex'Tora stood frozen at the entrance to the beast quarter, unable to process the scene before him. The containment field on Atlas's pen was deactivated. The enormous black Draknir terror of the galaxy, nightmare-made flesh, was sitting calmly with its massive head resting in the lap of Recruit Barnes. The tiny human was casually scratching between its armored plate ridges while reading something on her datapad. "What in the 7 moons of Draxus do you think you're doing?" Vex'Tora finally managed to sputter. Penelope looked up, seeming mildly surprised to see them. "Oh, hello, Commander. I finished the cleaning assignment and was just catching up on the Draknir handling protocols. Atlas has been helping me understand some of the nuances the manual glosses over." "Atlas has been helping you," Vex'Tora repeated, wondering if he'd somehow ingested hallucinogenic fungi. "He's really quite intelligent," Penelope continued, as if discussing the weather. "Did you know their scale patterns can shift slightly to communicate complex emotional states? The manual doesn't mention that at all." The massive predator, as if to demonstrate, rippled its scales in a wave pattern. Then, most disturbing of all, it made a sound that resembled nothing so much as a contented purr. "How are you not dead?" Lieutenant Krav blurted out. Penelope shrugged. "Atlas and I reached an understanding, predator to predator." "Predator 2. Vex'Tora couldn't even finish the sentence. "This fragile human creature," referring to herself as a predator. "Humans evolved as persistence hunters, Commander," she explained patiently. "We may not look imposing, but our ancestors could track prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. We recognize predatory intelligence when we see it." She scratched under Atlas's jaw, causing the massive beast to close its eyes in apparent bliss. "And we respect it." That's completely against protocol," Vex'Tora finally managed. "The Draknir bonding process takes years of preparation and—" "With all due respect, Commander," Penelope interrupted, "I believe your protocols might benefit from some revision. The aggressive approach creates unnecessary barriers. The Draknirs respond much better to calm confidence and mutual respect." As if to punctuate her point, Atlas rose to its feet, towering over all of them. With deliberate movements, the massive creature positioned itself behind Penelope, its massive form making her appear even smaller by comparison. Then, to Vex'Tora's utter disbelief, the beast lowered its head to rest lightly against the human's shoulder in a protective gesture. "I think Atlas and I will make an excellent team," Penelope said with a smile that suddenly seemed much less innocent and much more predatory. When do we start actual training? Vex'Tora felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the truth. This unassuming human hadn't just survived her punishment detail, she'd turned it into an opportunity. Yeah, and in doing so, she'd bonded with the most dangerous Draknir in the Alliance's arsenal, a feat no warrior had accomplished in decades of trying. Lieutenant Krav, Vex'Tora said slowly, not taking his four eyes off the human and her new companion. I believe we need to reevaluate our assessment of Earth and its inhabitants. Behind Penelope Barnes, the massive black Draknir's mouth opened in what looked disturbingly like a smile. News traveled fast on Outpost Sigma 9. By the next rotation cycle, every recruit and officer whispered about the small human female who had somehow tamed Atlas, the most feared Draknir in the Alliance's arsenal. Commander Vex'Tora had spent a sleepless night reviewing everything in the Alliance database about humans, trying to understand how he had so severely underestimated their capabilities. So they don't have claws, venomous glands, or significant muscle density, he muttered to Krav as they observed the morning training session from their elevated platform. They can't even regulate their body temperature properly. What am I missing? Below them, Penelope Barnes stood in formation with the other recruits. Unlike yesterday, no one dared to crowd her or make dismissive comments. A 2-meter bubble of personal space surrounded her, as if the other recruits sensed something dangerous about her that wasn't visible to the eye. Maybe it's a fluke, Krav suggested without conviction. One human got lucky with one Draknir. Atlas isn't just one Draknir, Vex'Tora snapped. The beast killed 18 of our best warriors during its capture. Now it follows her around like a newly hatched Quarian fledgling. On cue, the massive doors to the training arena slid open, and Atlas padded in. Regulations dictated that Draknirs remain in the Beast Quarter, except during official training exercises. But the night crew reported that the containment systems had mysteriously malfunctioned at 3. No one had been brave enough to try forcing the creature back into its pen. The black Draknir ignored everyone else, moving with frightening speed straight toward Penelope. Several instructors reached for their weapons, but Vex'Tora waved them down. He needed to observe this. Instead of mauling the tiny human as everyone half expected, Atlas circled her once, then settled into a sitting position beside her, its massive head level with her shoulder despite being seated. Penelope reached up without looking and scratched a spot between its armored plates, causing the beast's eyes to half close in apparent contentment. This changes the training regimen, Vex'Tora decided. Lieutenant, prepare the combat simulation chamber, level 8. Thief, level 8? Krav's multiple eyes widened. Sir, that's reserved for final assessment of veteran teams. The survival rate for new recruits is less than 30%. Exactly. Vex'Tora's mandibles clicked in grim determination. I want to see what this human and her new pet are truly capable of. Penelope knew they were testing her. The whispered conversations, the stunned looks, the hurried conferences among the command staff had all pointed to a rapid reassessment of her capabilities. That was fine by her. She'd expected resistance, though perhaps not quite so quickly. They're going to throw something big at us today, she whispered to Atlas as they stood waiting for instructions. The massive Draknir's scales rippled slightly in acknowledgement. She'd spent half the night in her quarters studying the subtle language of Draknir scale patterns, matching them with vocal tones and eye movements, until she began to piece together their communication system. Atlas had helped, displaying remarkable patience as she worked through various combinations. By morning, they had established a rudimentary communication framework that went far beyond the simplistic command structures used by other handlers. Recruit Barnes. Commander Vex'Tora's voice boomed across the training floor. Report to Simulation Chamber Alpha immediately. A murmur ran through the assembled recruits. Simulation Chamber Alpha was where the most dangerous training exercises took place, typically reserved for advanced trainees with years of experience. Looks like we get to skip the preliminaries, Penelope remarked to Atlas, who rumbled in response. She set off toward the designated area, the massive predator padding silently beside her. Lieutenant Krav waited for them at the entrance, his expression unreadable. The commander has authorized a Level 8 combat simulation for you and your partner. Level 8, Penelope repeated, keeping her face neutral despite her internal surprise. According to the training materials she'd memorized, Level 8 scenarios were designed to push even veteran teams to their breaking point. The objective is simple, Krav continued. Retrieve the target from the central chamber and return to the extraction point within the allotted time. The simulation will include environmental hazards and multiple hostile entities. Understood, Penelope nodded. Any specific parameters I should be aware of? Krav seemed momentarily thrown by her businesslike attitude. Just try not to die, recruit. The medical regeneration tanks are already at capacity from yesterday's training accidents. With that encouraging send-off, the doors to Simulation Chamber Alpha opened, revealing a shadowy interior. Penelope stepped inside, Atlas following closely. The moment they crossed the threshold, the environment transformed. Advanced holographic technology combined with physical elements created a dense, swampy terrain. The air turned thick with humidity, and the ground beneath their feet shifted treacherously. Dwarven swamplands, Penelope identified immediately, recalling her xenogeography studies, native to the Epsilon Quadrant. Known for quicksand pockets, toxic spore clouds, and a guttural howl cut through the artificial fog. Aggressive indigenous predators, she finished. Perfect, Atlas growled. Dropping into a combat stance through their newly established connection, Penelope sensed not fear, but anticipation from the Draknir. This was its natural element, the hunt. The hunt, we need to move smart. Not just fast, she said, placing a hand on Atlas's armored shoulder. The quickest route will be the most dangerous. That's what they expect us to do. She surveyed their surroundings, noting the subtle environmental cues that most would miss. A slightly different coloration in the vegetation to their right indicated a hidden pathway through the swamp, one that would be less direct but potentially safer. This way, she decided. As they moved through the treacherous terrain, Penelope realized Atlas was adapting to her movement patterns, slowing his naturally loping gait to match her smaller steps. More impressively, he was actively using his superior senses to scout ahead, warning her of dangers before they became apparent. Hold, Penelope whispered, dropping to a crouch. Atlas froze instantly. Ahead, the mist parted momentarily, revealing a hunting party of Zoran soldiers, fearsome, mantis-like warriors with natural carapace armor and vicious bladed limbs. The simulation had spawned at least 8 of them, patrolling the path to the central chamber. They blocked the main approach, she assessed, typical pincer formation. They're expecting a frontal assault. Atlas rumbled questioningly, scales shifting in a pattern she was beginning to recognize as a strategic inquiry. No, we won't give them what they want, Penelope replied, smiling. Humans didn't survive by being obvious. She pointed to a dense thicket of vegetation to their left. SDS. See how the spore pods are clustered there? If agitated, they'll release a thick cloud not toxic to us in small doses, but it'll obscure their vision completely. Atlas's scales rippled in understanding. I need you to circle around, she continued, sketching a route in the damp soil. Create a distraction there, then meet me at these coordinates. Don't engage directly unless absolutely necessary. The Draknir tilted its massive head, studying her plan. Then, with a soft huff that she interpreted as approval, it slipped away into the mist, moving with astonishing stealth for a creature of its size. Penelope counted to 100, then began working her way toward the central chamber using the dense undergrowth as cover. In the distance, she heard sudden shouts and the distinctive sound of spore pods rupturing. Her distraction was working. In the control room overlooking the simulation chamber, Vex'Tora watched with growing disbelief as Penelope and Atlas executed their strategy. She split up from her Draknir. One of the technicians noted, surprise evident in their voice. No trainee has ever voluntarily separated from their bonded predator during combat training. She's not separating, Vex'Tora realized, watching the tactical display. She's coordinating. Look at their movement patterns. They're executing a pincer maneuver of their own. On the screens, Atlas had successfully drawn most of the Zoran soldiers away from their posts, leading them on a wild chase through the swamp. The massive Draknirs seemed to be deliberately avoiding direct combat, instead using the environment against the pursuers, luring them into quicksand pockets and toxic plant clusters. Meanwhile, Penelope had reached the central chamber virtually unopposed. The structure, designed to resemble an ancient temple, was supposedly guarded by 2 elite Zoran warriors, but they too had abandoned their posts to join the hunt for Atlas. "She's turned our strongest simulation assets into an uncoordinated mob," Lieutenant Krav observed with grudging respect. "And she did it without firing a single shot." Vex'Tora leaned forward, mandibles clicking in agitation. "Increased difficulty by 30%. At a climate hazard." The technicians complied, and storm clouds gathered in the simulation sky. Torrential rain began pouring down, turning the already treacherous swamp into a flooded maze. Penelope felt the simulation parameters changing as she entered the central chamber. The sudden downpour would make extraction significantly more difficult, especially once she retrieved the target. Speaking of which, much in the center of the chamber, a glowing data crystal sat on a pedestal, surrounded by what appeared to be a security field. Standard protocol would dictate careful deactivation of the field using the proper bypass codes. "No time for that," she muttered, pulling out her utility knife. With quick, precise movements, she pried up a section of the pedestal's exterior paneling, exposing the power conduits beneath. One quick slice later, the security field flickered and died. She grabbed the crystal and secured it in her pocket. Now for the hard part: reaching the extraction point with her prize while navigating a flooded swamp filled with agitated predators. A familiar rumble from behind made her smile. Atlas had completed his diversion and found her, right on schedule. "Extraction point is northeast, approximately 2 clicks. The terrain will be mostly underwater now, and the Zorans will have regrouped," she told her partner. "Ready for a swim?" Atlas's scales rippled in what she now recognized as amusement. The massive creature lowered its body, a clear invitation for her to climb aboard. "Smart thinking," she agreed, mounting the Draknir's back and positioning herself between its armored spine plates. "Let's show them what we can really do." Atlas burst from the temple at full speed, a blur of midnight scales and raw power. The Zoran warriors, regrouping near the entrance, barely had time to raise their weapons before the Draknir plowed through them like they were made of paper. Penelope clung to her mount as they raced through the rapidly flooding swamp. Atlas moved with incredible surety, somehow finding solid footing where none should exist. The few Zorans who managed to get in their way were either trampled beneath massive claws or batted aside by the Draknir's armored tail. "Hostiles approaching from the left flank," Penelope warned, spotting movement through the rain. 3, no, 4 shooters. Energy bolts sizzled through the air around them. Atlas swerved without breaking stride, using fallen vegetation as cover. When a particularly persistent Zoran closed in, Penelope drew her sidearm and fired with calm precision, then hitting the creature's primary sensory organ and sending it crashing into the muck. The extraction point came into view, a raised platform with a pulsing beacon, now nearly surrounded by floodwater. Between them and safety stood a final obstacle: a massive Zoran brood queen, easily 3 times the size of the warriors they'd encountered. "They've really pulled out all the stops," Penelope noted, assessing the situation. The brood queen's carapace would be impervious to her small sidearm, and even Atlas would struggle against an opponent of that size in direct combat. The Draknir slowed, growling low in its throat as it evaluated the threat. "We're not going to outmuscle this one," Penelope said, mind racing. Then she spotted something. The platform supporting the brood queen rested on structural pylons already partially submerged in floodwater. "Atlas, follow my lead," she directed, sliding from his back. She splashed through knee-deep water toward a cluster of spore pods growing along the edge of the platform. The movement immediately attracted the brood queen's attention, its massive head swiveling toward her. Exactly as planned, as the enormous creature lunged for Penelope, Atlas circled behind at tremendous speed, smashing into one of the support pylons with his full body weight. The structure groaned ominously. Penelope ducked under a vicious swipe from the Brood Queen's bladed limb, rolling through the water to reach the spore pods. With one fluid motion, she slashed open the entire cluster, creating an explosive release of thick, obscuring spores directly in the Queen's face. The massive creature reared back, momentarily blinded. In that instant, Atlas struck the same pylon again, this time with enough force to shatter it completely. The platform tilted dramatically. The disoriented Brood Queen, unable to regain its balance, slid helplessly into the deepest part of the floodwater. Despite its size, the creature wasn't adapted for swimming, its heavy carapace dragging it under. "Now!" Penelope shouted, running for the extraction point. Atlas bounded to her side, and together they crossed the threshold just as the timer hit 0. The simulation dissolved around them, revealing the featureless interior of Chamber Alpha. Penelope stood dripping wet but triumphant, the data crystal still clutched in her hand. Beside her, Atlas shook himself, sending water droplets flying in all directions. The chamber doors slid open, revealing Commander Vex'Tora, Lieutenant Krav, and a group of stunned training officers. "Level 8 completed, sir," Penelope reported calmly, handing the crystal to the speechless commander. "Will there be anything else?" 3 days later, Vex'Tora stood before the Galactic Alliance High Command, delivering his quarterly assessment of new recruits. The assembled generals and admirals represented over 30 different species, each with their own impressive evolutionary advantages. In summary, Vex'Tora concluded, this recruitment cycle has yielded several promising candidates, but one in particular deserves special mention. He activated a holographic display, showing footage of Penelope and Atlas moving in perfect synchronization through increasingly difficult training scenarios. In the days following the Level 8 simulation, he had subjected them to every test in the Alliance playbook, and some he invented specifically for them. They had passed them all with unprecedented efficiency. Recruit Penelope Barnes has demonstrated capabilities that completely redefine our understanding of human potential, he stated. Her partnership with Atlas represents the most successful Draknir bonding in Alliance history. Admiral Zorn, a veteran Praxian with decades of service, leaned forward. "One successful human hardly justifies revising our tactical assessments of the entire species, Commander. With respect, Admiral, I believe it does," Vex'Tora countered. "After extensive research and observation, I've identified what makes humans uniquely dangerous and valuable to the Alliance." The holographic display shifted to show various human historical records and biological data. The humans evolved not as apex predators, but as persistence hunters who used intelligence and cooperative strategies to overcome physically superior prey. This created a species with an unparalleled ability to understand, adapt to, and ultimately control other predators. "You're suggesting we've been viewing humans through the wrong lens entirely?" asked General Thrix. "Precisely," Vex'Tora nodded. "We evaluated them based on physical attributes and found them wanting, but their true evolutionary advantage lies in their cognitive abilities, specifically their capacity for what they call empathy. They can intuitively understand the minds of other species in ways that even our most advanced telepaths cannot match." The display showed Penelope working with Atlas, their movements perfectly coordinated despite no visible commands being given. "Recruit Barnes didn't tame Atlas," Vex'Tora explained. "She understood him. She recognized his intelligence and communicated with him on his terms. In 3 days, she developed a more sophisticated Draknir communication system than our specialists have managed in 3 decades. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "I am therefore recommending immediate implementation of a specialized training program for human recruits, focused on Draknir partnership and deep space reconnaissance," and Vex'Tora continued. "Furthermore, I suggest we reconsider Earth's status within the Alliance hierarchy. A species with this particular talent could revolutionize our approach to xenobiological integration across the board." After the meeting adjourned, Lieutenant Krav approached his commander in the corridor. That was quite a dramatic reassessment of humans, he noted. Just days ago, you were comparing them to pets. Vex'Tora's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. A wise commander adapts to new information, Lieutenant. The galaxy is full of physically imposing species. But a small, soft-bodied creature that can make our most fearsome predator follow her every command? He shuddered slightly. That is truly terrifying. What will happen to Barnes now? She's been promoted directly to Special Operations, Vex'Tora replied. The first of what I suspect will be many humans in that division. As if summoned by their conversation, Penelope peered at the far end of the corridor, Atlas padding silently beside her. She wore a new uniform bearing the elite insignia of Spec Ops. Several high-ranking officers moved hurriedly out of her path, eyeing the massive Draknir with nervous respect. Commander Vex'Tora, she greeted as she approached. I wanted to thank you for the recommendation. You earned it. Officer Barnes, he replied stiffly. Atlas and I are shipping out tomorrow. Apparently there's a situation in the Omega sector that requires our particular skill set. Vex'Tora nodded. The Ravager incursions, it's a dangerous assignment. We're looking forward to it. Penelope smiled. And there was something in that expression that made Vex'Tora's exoskeleton tighten instinctively. It was the same look Atlas got just before pouncing on prey. As she walked away, Atlas matching her stride perfectly, Vex'Tora turned to his lieutenant. Update the Alliance Combat Manual, he ordered. Create a new classification. Human Draknir Combat Pairs. Threat Assessment Level. Omega. Omega? Krav repeated incredulously. That's reserved for planet killers and sentient superweapons. Vex'Tora watched the retreating forms of the small human woman and the massive predator that obeyed her every step. Trust me, Lieutenant, he said quietly. That's exactly what they are.